Hello, and welcome back for Politics 301. This time we'll be discussing the education myth in politics. And again, thank you for joining us. If you're seeing this video out of sequence, we're doing a video series on how homeschoolers can become more feared and politically respected in state legislatures. And we've spent the last two videos laying out what politics is and isn't, and two paths to political power. The first path, of course, is running for office, but that's not the path we're interested in today. The second path is the indirect path. That is, you want to influence what the legislators in the Capitol building do. You're not in the seat, you're just wanting the guy in the seat to do what you want him to do. So there are two theories on how to do the indirect path to power effectively. If you're the note-taking homeschool mom like me, there's a fork in the road here, and this is where 98% of us homeschoolers have taken the wrong path in the past, okay? The first one, and this is the one that most people fall for, is what we call the education theory of indirect influence. It goes something like this. We have to educate X about Y in order to get them to do Z. And usually they mean politicians. If we just make them read the bill, if we just make them read the Constitution, if they just knew what homeschoolers really are about, if they just knew the data on, the results of homeschooling, okay? So if we just had them read the bill, read the Constitution, here's the problem. First of all, they can't read. And secondly, even if they could, the reading comprehension is too hard, okay? And thirdly, they already think that they're doing that, okay? And I want to give a good example, a personal example from my own life of this being lived out, okay? We're going to educate the politicians to agree with us on this principle. So back in 2011, I was involved in politics in the state of Iowa. And at that time, in the state capitol, libertarian author Tom Woods came with a book about nullification and how we could undo federal laws at the state level, right? It's a great book. Tom Woods is widely respected. He's widely known. I had met him at several other political events before that. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but I worked on Ron Paul's presidential campaign in the 2007 and 8 race. And so I had met him in that context. And so here we're in the state capitol again, and he's brought to the state capitol a copy of his new book on nullification. I like Tom Woods. I like the book, right? That's not the question. He handed out a copy of this book and a packet, right? A little baggie with flyers and the book itself and kind of a one-sheet explanation of what nullification was and how politicians in the Iowa legislature could use it to nullify bad federal laws and all this great stuff, which again, I totally agree with the idea he was trying to get across to legislators. But let me tell you how that went. They all met with him. Not all of them, but, their staff received them and everybody got their copy of the book, okay? That night, in the trash can in the Iowa Capitol, dozens of copies of Tom Woods' book, okay? They don't care to be educated. They don't care, okay? They don't want to be educated. It doesn't matter. They think they're already doing what they know is best to keep their seats, to keep themselves in power. And so the indirect path is we're going to educate people, and I'm telling you, 30 to 50 copies of Tom Woods' books are in the trash can, and that's how educating legislators goes, okay? You go up there, they pat you on the head, they're not going to argue with you, they're not going to say you're wrong, they're not going to say you're stupid, they're not going to get into the policy discussion with you, they don't care. How long do I have to entertain this yahoo before they'll go home and I can get back to being in power, right? The indirect path of education is where most homeschoolers, and I grew up in this world, let's go to the Capitol for homeschool day and take a picture with our legislator. And oftentimes states will have you bring a baked good or a pie. Cherry pie day is a common thing. Like, we're going to go up there and tell them how great homeschoolers are so that next time a bill comes up that we want them to do something on, they're going to remember how sweet we are. We're going to educate them about how great homeschoolers are, okay? So suffice to say, this is back in 2011 that I see this Tom Woods situation unfold, and I'm like, okay, well, that method clearly doesn't work. That's just not an option if you want to be effective. Now, the more pernicious form of this theory says we have to educate the voters. Okay. And I just want to say right out the door, that's total madness. We will never, ever, ever educate the voters. How are we going to do that about homeschooling? With what time? Okay. Are we going to get out a big, huge PR campaign to tell literally millions of Americans, or in individual states? Well, I live in Texas. If I want 51% of the population to support bills that are good for homeschooling and stop bills that are bad for homeschooling, I need to educate 15 million voters. How on earth are we going to do that? With what time? With what money? It's totally ridiculous. So most folks who believe in the fantasy of educating the voters think the answer would be to, write letters to the editor, buy full page ads, put commercials on TV. But let's just back it up a little bit and say, as homeschoolers, we all have people nearer to us, not total strangers, not, random, tax-paying voter with a television in another district. We have friends and relatives and church members who don't agree with us on homeschooling, okay? And maybe we've argued with them. Maybe we've had discussions. Maybe we've tried to educate them. We've talked about how wonderful homeschooling is. We've said how well our kids are doing. If we can't convince the people nearest to us, the people who are related to us, our friends, our families, our church members, what on earth makes us think that even if we had the time and even if we had the money, we could educate the majority of the country? It doesn't work. The education theory doesn't work. It never has. And while we're busy wasting time and money trying to teach the unteachable, the other side is out there ruling. Okay? And I mentioned some of this in the last video, but I'm going to say it again. They didn't educate anybody. They didn't get 51% of the legislature to agree with them. They didn't get 51% of the population to agree with them. They took the second indirect path to power, and we're going to talk about that one next. So I'll get into that in a whole other video, but I just sit with this for a minute. This was, I grew up heavily involved in politics. I worked for Ron Paul. I worked for Ron Paul in Virginia when I was in college. And then I came back to the Midwest and I did events in Iowa and throughout the upper Midwest, because of course Iowa has the straw poll. And if you're going to try to do anything in presidential politics, you got to start at the Iowa straw poll. I've been all over that area and this whole space for a very long time, starting when I was, 16, 17 and before. And so it's very counterintuitive for homeschoolers to hear this stuff. It's like, I know when I first was hearing it, I was like, but if they just knew like that what they're saying violates the Constitution, or if they just knew that what they're saying, it can't be funded. There's no money to do this. It's a great idea, but there's no money. Like I really wrestled with, we just got to teach them and show them and help them. They need to agree with us ideologically. They need to understand what we believe, and they have to agree with us because they understand what we're about, and they have to really have some ideological commitment to our principles, or at least some basic agreement with our principles. It was very difficult for me to let go of that and to realize, ice water in the face getting into politics as a teenager. That's not how the game is played. And that's people talking about politics at the theory level, at the principles behind it level. That those people don't actually do politics. Okay, they study like the results of politics, or they study the theory of social policy. But the people actually doing politics, they'll tell you that I'm telling you the truth. Okay, we cannot wait until we have 51% of the population agreeing with homeschooling, or 51% of the legislature agreeing with homeschooling. We have to become more politically feared and respected, even though we're only, 6% of students in America. I know that number is growing. I think we'll be 10% in, 5 or 8 years, but still we're always going to be up against a bigger number of people. Okay, there's always going to be the government-funded infrastructure of big ed. So we cannot wait until 51% of the legislature agrees with us, or 51% of the population especially. That's never going to happen. But we have to be effective before that. And that's where the second path to indirect power That is what the Homeschool Freedom Coalition is about. That is the path we are on. We want you to come with us. We want you to join us in this. We want to be effective. We want to be respected. And we want homeschoolers to not get trodden underfoot and co-opted by the government in the next 10 to 20 years. Because, and I say this all the time, and we've said it on our website, but I'll say it again. If we don't defend homeschooling in the next 10 to 15 years, in 20 years, all education in America will be government education. We're going to have regulations following these school choice bills in all the red states. And now the Department of Education has been dismantled. We're going to have blue states going and putting into state law stuff that's worse than the Department of Ed ever dreamed. Okay? In 20 to 30 years, all education will be government education if we don't round this bend. If we don't get around this corner on stop trying to educate people and start trying to use the other indirect path, which I'll talk about next time. But I just want to get this out there. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you listening. If you haven't yet, follow us on social, sign up for our email alerts, share this, okay? Send it to your husband and be like, this chick's out of her mind, right? Like, share it to your homeschool co-op, share it to your friends. We have to get this word out. Legislative session kicks off in just a couple of months. And of course, you know, these videos will be on the internet forever. So there's always a legislative session coming. So please get involved. Go to the Homeschool Freedom Coalition website, sign up there. Join us if you're able. Donate to help us keep getting this word out. We're in this for the long haul. And in the meantime, I end every video with stay free, stay the course.